The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Military Academy for the third time that week. Students rushed out of their rooms and into the hallways, looking around with worried faces. They all knew what the sound meant. Cadet 13 was having another episode. In the main training hall, smoke filled the air. Broken pieces of metal and concrete lay scattered across the floor. The walls had deep cracks running through them like spider webs. In the center of all this damage stood a tall figure, with skin that looked like living crystal. The figure's body glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed with anger. Cadet 13 was 7 feet tall and built like a warrior. His crystalline skin could change from solid to liquid and back again at will. His eyes burned with a bright silver, light that made most people look away in fear. Right now those eyes showed nothing but rage. "Stay back," shouted Instructor Knox, a battle-hardened veteran from the Rigel system. "Everyone get to the safe zones." The other students needed no encouragement. They had seen what happened when 13 lost control. 3 cadets were still in the medical bay from the last incident. Commander Vex arrived at the scene with his security team. The blue-skinned Altarian leader had run this academy for 20 years. He had dealt with difficult students from dozens of different species, but nothing had prepared him for Cadet 13. "What happened this time?" Commander Vex asked Instructor Knox. "Same as always," Knox replied, keeping his eyes on the angry cadet. "Someone bumped into him during weapons training. Just a small accident, but 13 exploded like a bomb." Commander Vex watched as 13 lifted chunks of broken concrete with his mind. The pieces floated in the air around the cadet like angry birds. With a flick of his wrist, 13 sent them flying into the wall. Each impact made a sound like thunder. "Cadet 13, Commander Vex called out. "Stand down immediately." The crystalline figure turned toward the commander. For a moment, the silver eyes seemed to focus. Then 13 smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Make me," 13 said. His voice sounded like breaking glass. The security team raised their weapons, but Commander Vex held up a hand to stop them. He knew that energy weapons would only make 13 stronger. The cadet's crystalline body could absorb most forms of energy and redirect them as psychic attacks. "We both know you don't want to hurt anyone," Commander Vex said carefully. "You're angry, not evil. Let's talk about this." Laughed. The sound made everyone in the room feel cold. "You think I care about hurting people? Look around you, Commander. This is what I do. This is what I am." More pieces of debris began to float into the air. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Other cadets who were still watching from the doorways began to back away. Even the bravest students knew better than to stay too close when 13 was like this. "Your people sent you here to learn control," Commander Vex continued. "The Zephyrian Council believes you can become a great warrior, but you have to want to change. My people," 13's voice rose with anger. "My people threw me away like garbage. They sent me here because they were afraid of me, just like everyone else." The floating debris began to spin faster. Cracks appeared in the remaining walls. Commander Vex realized the situation was getting worse, not better. "That's not true," he said. "You're here because you have potential. Yes, you're powerful, but power without control is just destruction." "Destruction is all I'm good for," 13 replied. The spinning debris suddenly stopped. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then 13 raised both hands and sent every piece of floating concrete and metal flying in different directions. The security team dove for cover. Instructor Knox pulled Commander Vex behind a damaged training platform. The sound of impacts filled the air for several seconds. When it finally stopped, the training hall looked like a war zone. In the center of it all, Cadet 13 stood breathing heavily. The blue glow around his body had grown brighter. His crystalline skin shifted and flowed like water, showing his emotional state. "Feel better now?" Commander Vex asked, stepping out from behind cover. Looked around at the damage he had caused. For just a moment, something like regret flashed across his face. Then the cold anger returned. "This is what happens when people get too close to me," 13 said. "Learn from it." Without another word, the cadet walked toward the exit. The other students pressed themselves against the walls to let him pass. None of them wanted to accidentally touch him or make eye contact. Commander Vex watched 13 leave, then looked around at the destroyed training hall. This was the third major incident in 2 months. The Academy's repair budget was already stretched thin, and the other students were becoming afraid to attend classes. "Sir," Instructor Knox said quietly, "we have to do something about this. The other cadets can't learn in an environment of fear." "I know," Commander Vex replied. He pulled out his datapad and began reviewing 13's file again. Born on Zephyr Prime, the only child of his kind to develop such extreme psychic abilities. Sent to 3 different training facilities before arriving at the Academy. Each previous school had expelled him for similar incidents. The Zephyrian species was known for their crystal-based biology and mild telepathic abilities. But 13 was different. His powers were 10 times stronger than normal. He could move objects with his mind, read thoughts, and even manipulate energy fields. In the hands of a trained soldier, such abilities would be incredible assets. In the hands of an angry, unstable teenager, they were weapons of mass destruction. "What about psychological counseling?" Instructor Knox suggested. "Maybe if we could understand why he's so angry." "We've tried that," Commander Vex said. "He's been to 4 different therapists. He either scares them away or refuses to cooperate. The last one said 13 has walls around his mind that can't be broken. Punishment? Doesn't work. We tried isolation, extra duties, restricted privileges. Nothing affects him. He doesn't seem to care about consequences. Rewards then? Also useless. He turns down promotions, special privileges, even extra food rations. It's like he doesn't want anything we can offer." Commander Vex closed the datapad with a sigh. In his 20 years of running the Academy, he had never encountered a student like this. Most problem cadets responded to some form of motivation. They either wanted approval, feared punishment, or could be reached through appeals to their honor or duty. But Cadet 13 seemed to exist in his own world of anger and isolation. He had no friends among the other students. He showed no interest in the Academy's traditions or values. He completed his academic work with perfect scores but put no effort into building relationships or following rules. "Maybe we should recommend expulsion," Instructor Knox said, "for everyone's safety." Commander Vex considered this option. It would certainly solve their immediate problem, but it would also mean giving up on a cadet with incredible potential. If 13 could learn control, he could become one of the galaxy's greatest defenders. If not, he might become one of its greatest threats. "Not yet," Commander Vex decided. "Give me 1 more week. I want to try something different." "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet, but there has to be a way to reach him. There has to be something that 13 wants or fears or cares about. We just have to find it." As they walked out of the destroyed training hall, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. Cadet 13 had heard every word of their conversation. The silver light in his eyes flickered with something that might have been hope. Or maybe it was just more anger. Only time would tell. 3 days after the latest incident with Cadet 13, Commander Vex sat in his office staring at repair bills. The cost of fixing the training hall would eat up half of his monthly budget. The Academy's board of directors was already asking hard questions about why they kept such a dangerous student. A soft chime from his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called out. His assistant, a small green-skinned Vegan named Pip, walked in carrying a datapad. "Sir, the new exchange instructor has arrived, the one from Earth." Commander Vex looked up with confusion. "Earth? I don't remember requesting anyone from there." "It's part of the new Terran integration program," Pip explained. "The Galactic Council wants to include humans in more military training programs. This Captain Morrison is supposed to observe our methods and share human techniques." "Humans," Commander Vex muttered. He had heard about the species but never met one personally. They were newcomers to galactic society, having only developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most reports described them as physically weak and technologically behind other races. What could they possibly teach us? "Shall I send him away?" Pip asked. Commander Vex thought for a moment. His current staff was already stretched thin dealing with 13's problems. An extra instructor, even an inexperienced one, might be useful. No, bring him in. Let's see what Earth has to offer. A few minutes later, Pip returned with a human male. Commander Vex studied the newcomer with interest. The human stood about 6 feet tall, which was short by galactic standards. His brown hair was cut military short, and his green eyes looked alert and intelligent. He wore a simple blue uniform with captain's bars on the shoulders. Commander Vex, the human said with a slight bow. I'm Captain Jake Morrison, Terran Defense Corps. Thank you for allowing me to join your academy. His voice was calm and steady. Commander Vex found himself oddly impressed by the human's bearing. Despite being surrounded by alien technology and beings much larger than himself, Jake showed no signs of fear or intimidation. Captain Morrison, Commander Vex replied. Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. I admit I'm curious about what human military training involves. Jake smiled. Probably nothing you haven't seen before, sir. We focus heavily on adaptability, problem solving, and working with limited resources. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest species, so we've learned to be creative. Interesting. Commander Vex gestured to a chair. Please sit. Tell me about your experience. Jake sat down and pulled out a small datapad. 10 years active duty, mostly in conflict resolution and peacekeeping operations. I've specialized in working with difficult situations and challenging personnel. Challenging personnel? Commander Vex's interest increased. What kind of challenges? Soldiers. With trauma, disciplinary problems, or those who don't fit standard training methods. On Earth, we've learned that sometimes traditional military approaches don't work for everyone. Some people need different kinds of motivation or guidance. Commander Vex leaned forward. This conversation was taking an unexpected turn. And you've had success with these difficult cases? Most of the time, yes. I've found that understanding why someone is acting out is usually more effective than just punishing them. People rarely cause problems for no reason. There's usually pain or fear behind the behavior. An idea began to form in Commander Vex's mind. It was probably foolish, but he was running out of options with Cadet 13. Captain Morrison, how would you feel about taking on a particularly challenging assignment? Jake's eyes lit up with interest. I'd welcome the opportunity, sir. We have a cadet here who... Commander Vex paused, trying to find the right words. Let's say he has trouble with authority and emotional control. He's extremely powerful but completely undisciplined. Several instructors have tried to work with him without success. What kind of power are we talking about? Jake asked. Telekinetic abilities, telepathy, energy manipulation. He's from the Zephyrian species, but his abilities are far beyond normal ranges. When he loses control, he can level buildings. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Has anyone tried to understand why he's so angry? We've attempted psychological counseling, but he refuses to cooperate. He seems to take pleasure in making others afraid of him. That sounds like defensive behavior, Jake said. People who feel powerless sometimes try to control their environment through fear. It's a way of protecting themselves from being hurt. Commander Vex was surprised by this response. Most military officers would have immediately suggested stronger discipline or removal from the program. You think he's afraid? Possibly, or hurt. Or maybe he's never learned proper ways to express his emotions. Without knowing his background, it's hard to say, but I'd be interested in working with him. Captain Morrison, with respect, this cadet has injured seasoned warriors. He destroyed our main training facility last week. Are you sure you understand what you're volunteering for? Jake's expression remained calm. Commander, on Earth we have children who act out because they've been abused or neglected. They lash out at anyone who tries to help them because they expect to be hurt. Sometimes the most dangerous ones are just the most scared. This isn't a child, Captain. Cadet 13 is a fully grown member of a warrior species with abilities that could kill you without effort. Every person I've worked with could have killed me, Jake replied with a slight smile. Humans are fragile compared to most species, but sometimes being non-threatening is an advantage. People don't feel the need to prove themselves against someone they don't see as a rival. Commander Vex studied the human's face. Jake seemed completely serious about this insane proposal. You really think you can reach someone that our best instructors have failed with? I don't know, Jake said honestly. But I'd like to try. What's the worst that could happen? You could die, Commander Vex said bluntly. I could die walking down the hallway, Jake replied. At least this way, if something goes wrong, it might help us understand the cadet better. Sometimes failure teaches us as much as success. Despite his better judgment, Commander Vex found himself considering the idea. Jake's approach was completely different from anything they had tried. Maybe that was exactly what they needed. The other instructors think he's hopeless, Commander Vex warned. They want him expelled before he seriously hurts someone. What do you think? Jake asked. Commander Vex was quiet for a long moment. I think he has incredible potential. If we could channel his abilities properly, he could become one of our finest graduates. But I also think he's dangerous, and getting worse. Then we have nothing to lose by trying something new, Jake said. Commander Vex made his decision. Very well, Captain Morrison. Cadet 13 is now your responsibility. But I want daily reports, and if I think the situation is becoming too dangerous, I'm pulling you out immediately. Understood, sir. When can I meet him? Are you sure you don't want to observe him first? See what you're dealing with? Jake shook his head. I prefer to form my own impressions. Preconceived notions can interfere with building trust. Trust? Commander Vex almost laughed. Captain, this cadet doesn't trust anyone. He barely tolerates being in the same room with other people. Then that's where we'll start, Jake said simply. As Jake left the office, Commander Vex shook his head in amazement. Either the human was incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, probably both. But for the first time in months, he felt a small spark of hope about Cadet 13's future. The next morning, word spread quickly through the academy that the new human instructor had been assigned to work with their most dangerous student. The betting pools among the cadets gave Jake less than 3 days before he requested a transfer. Some of the more pessimistic students were betting he wouldn't last 3 hours, but Jake Morrison had faced impossible odds before, and he had learned long ago that sometimes the most hopeless cases just needed someone willing to see past their anger to the pain underneath. Jake Morrison spent his first day at the academy learning about the layout and daily routines. He visited the classrooms, training areas, and living quarters. He talked to other instructors and watched how they taught their classes. But he did not seek out Cadet 13. Instead, he waited. On the second morning, Jake took his breakfast to the academy's meditation garden. This was a peaceful outdoor space filled with plants from many different worlds. Soft blue flowers from Rigel grew next, to golden vines from the Centauri system. Small fountains made gentle sounds as water flowed over smooth stones. Jake found a quiet bench under a tree with silver leaves. He pulled out a book and began to read while eating his morning meal. The book was about ancient Earth philosophy, written in simple human text. Other cadets walked by on their way to classes, but none of them paid attention to the human sitting alone. After about an hour, Jake felt someone watching him. He looked up from his book to see a tall, crystalline figure standing at the edge of the garden. Cadet 13 stood perfectly still, studying the human with those bright silver eyes. Jake returned to his reading without saying anything. He could feel 13's gaze like heat against his skin, but he kept his attention on the book. Several minutes passed in silence. Finally, 13 began walking toward the bench. His footsteps made no sound on the soft grass, but Jake could sense his approach. The air around 13 seemed to shimmer with barely controlled energy. "You're the human," 13 said when he was close enough to speak. His voice carried the sound of breaking crystal, just as Commander Vex had described. Jake looked up from his book, with mild interest. "Yes, I am. You must be Cadet 13. I heard they assigned you to fix me," 13 continued. There was amusement in his voice, but also something darker. How interesting. The cadet's telekinetic aura began to glow more brightly. Several small stones near the fountain started to lift into the air. Plants began to bend away from 13 as if pushed by an invisible wind. Jake glanced at the floating stones, then back at his book. "I'm not here to fix you," he said calmly. This wasn't the response 13 had expected. Every other instructor had either shown fear or tried to assert authority. This human seemed completely uninterested in the display of power. "Then why are you here?" 13 asked. He made the floating stones spin faster, waiting for some reaction. "I'm here to understand you," Jake replied, turning a page in his book. Frowned. This conversation wasn't going as planned. He decided to escalate things. With a thought, he lifted a large boulder from the garden's decorative rock formation. The stone was easily 3 times larger than Jake's entire body. "Impressive control," Jake said without looking up. "I've read about Zephyrian abilities, but seeing them in person is fascinating." The boulder stopped moving. 13 stared at the human in confusion. Where was the fear? Where was the demand for him to stop? Even the bravest instructors had shown some concern when he demonstrated his power. "What's wrong with you?" 13 demanded. "Don't you understand what I could do to you?" Jake finally looked up from his book and met 13's silver eyes directly. "I understand perfectly. You could crush me, tear me apart, or throw me across the garden without breaking a sweat. You're incredibly powerful. Then why aren't you afraid?" "Because fear wouldn't help either of us," Jake said simply. "You're not going to hurt me." "How can you be so sure?" 13's voice rose with frustration. The floating boulder began to crack, under the pressure of his emotions. "Because if you wanted to hurt people randomly, you would have done it already. You've had plenty of opportunities. The fact that you haven't tells me you're not evil, just angry." The boulder suddenly exploded into dust. 13's crystalline skin shifted from blue to red, showing his emotional state. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right," Jake agreed. "That's why I said I'm here to understand you, not fix you. Understanding requires listening, not lecturing." For the first time in years, 13 felt genuinely confused. This human wasn't following any script he recognized. Jake wasn't trying to dominate him, wasn't cowering in fear, and wasn't offering empty words of encouragement. He was just there, calm and present. "Why do you care?" 13 asked. Some of the anger had gone out of his voice. Jake closed his book and gave 13 his full attention. "Because I've been where you are. Not with your abilities, obviously, but with the anger and isolation. I know what it's like to feel like the whole universe is against you." "Humans don't have real power," 13 said dismissively. "You couldn't understand." "Power comes in many forms," Jake replied. "On Earth, I knew a soldier who could kill 50 enemies with his bare hands. He was feared by everyone, even his own commanders. But he was the loneliest person I ever met. All that physical power couldn't protect him from his own pain." Their skin flickered between colors as he processed this information. What happened to him? He learned that real strength isn't about scaring people. It's about protecting them. Once he understood that, he became one of our greatest heroes, instead of our biggest problem. "Pretty story," 13 said, but his voice lacked its usual edge. "But I'm not human. I'm not built for your warm feelings and friendship." Jake smiled. "Zephyrians are actually very social creatures from what I've read. Your species values community and cooperation above individual achievement. Being alone must be incredibly painful for you." The words hit 13 like a physical blow. His crystalline features twisted with emotion, and for a moment his carefully maintained control slipped. Plants throughout the garden began to wilt as psychic energy poured off him in waves. "Stop," 13 whispered. "Just stop talking." But Jake continued, his voice gentle but persistent. "When did you last have a real conversation with someone? When did anyone ask how you were feeling instead of just telling you to control yourself?" "I said stop." 13's shout echoed through the garden. Several fountains cracked, and the silver-leafed tree above Jake's bench began to shed its leaves. But Jake didn't stop. He stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible and his movements calm. "You're not angry at me, 13. You're angry at a universe that made you different, and then punished you for it. You don't understand." 13's voice broke like his namesake crystal. Everything I touch gets destroyed. Everyone I care about gets hurt. This is what I am. No, Jake said firmly. This is what you've learned to be. There's a difference. For several seconds, the two figures stood facing each other in the damaged garden. 13's entire body glowed with unstable energy, while Jake remained perfectly still and calm. The contrast was striking. Power versus peace, chaos versus control. Slowly, 13's glow began to fade. His crystalline skin shifted back to its normal blue color. The psychic pressure in the air decreased until the remaining plants stopped bending away from him. "Why are you really here?" 13 asked quietly. "Because Commander Vex asked me to work with you," Jake said honestly. "But also because I see potential in you that's being wasted on anger and fear." Potential for what? To be the person you were, meant to be before the universe taught you to be afraid of yourself. He stared at Jake for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Jake watched him go, then sat back down on his bench and reopened his book. But he wasn't really reading anymore. The conversation had gone better than he had hoped. For the first time, 13 had shown real emotion instead of just rage. That was progress, even if it didn't look like it. Tomorrow, Jake decided he would try a different approach. But today had been a good start. For the next 2 weeks, Jake and Cadet 13 met in the meditation garden every morning. Their conversations were strange and unpredictable. Sometimes 13 would arrive angry and destructive, sending rocks flying through the air, while Jake calmly read his book. Other times, 13 would sit quietly on the opposite end of the bench, saying nothing for an entire hour. Jake never pushed. He never demanded that 13 talk or behave in any particular way. Instead, he shared stories about Earth, about human history, and about the soldiers he had worked with. He talked about wars and peace, about fear and courage, about the difference between strength and violence. Listened more than he spoke, but Jake could tell he was absorbing every word. The cadet's crystalline features would shift colors when certain topics interested him. His telekinetic aura would calm when Jake spoke about warriors who protected instead of conquered. Other instructors watched these meetings with confusion and worry. They saw no obvious progress. 13 still avoided other students, still completed his assignments with cold perfection, and still had occasional outbursts in class. But Jake noticed small changes that others missed. No longer destroyed property during his episodes. When he got angry, he would leave the room instead of lashing out. He stopped threatening other cadets even when they accidentally bumped into him or made noise during his study time. These might seem like tiny improvements, but Jake knew they were actually huge steps forward. The real breakthrough came during their 3rd week of meetings. Jake had been telling 13 about an ancient Earth tradition called Bushido, the way of the warrior. He explained how human samurai believed that true strength came from discipline, honor, and protecting those who could not protect themselves. "Your species has similar traditions," Jake said. Zephyrian crystal warriors were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and compassion, not just their power. 13 had been quiet during this conversation, but suddenly he spoke up. "My grandfather was a crystal warrior." This was the first time 13 had voluntarily shared personal information. Jake carefully kept his voice neutral. "Tell me about him." "He could shape crystal with his thoughts just like me. But he used his abilities to build things. Homes, gardens, art. He said power was meant to create, not destroy." 13's skin flickered between blue and silver as he remembered. "What happened? To him?" Jake asked gently. "He died when I was young. After that, my abilities started getting stronger. Much stronger than normal. My parents didn't know what to do with me. I kept breaking things by accident. I hurt my younger sister during a game. She was afraid of me after that." Jake waited patiently for 13 to continue. This was the most the cadet had ever revealed about his past. "The council elders said I was dangerous. They sent me to a training facility on the outer rim. The instructors there tried to suppress my abilities with dampening fields and medication. When that didn't work, they used punishment. Isolation, electric shocks, pain conditioning. Threen's voice became flat and emotionless as he spoke. I learned to hide my feelings, to push everyone away before they could hurt me. It was easier to be the monster they expected than to keep hoping someone might understand. How old were you? Jake asked. 12 standard years. I've been in training facilities ever since. This academy is just the latest in a long line of places that don't want me. Jake felt a wave of anger at the adults who had failed this young person so completely, but he kept his voice calm and steady. You were just a child. Children aren't supposed to have perfect control. They're supposed to make mistakes and learn from them. Children don't usually level buildings when they have nightmares, 13 said bitterly. No, but children also don't usually have abilities, like yours. The adults around you should have found ways to help you learn control gradually, safely. Instead, they treated you like a weapon that needed to be contained. Threen's crystalline skin began to glow brighter. Maybe that's all I am. Maybe they were right. Do you really believe that? Jake asked. It was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I've been the dangerous one for so long. I can't remember what it felt like to be anything else. I can see who you really are, Jake said. Under all that anger and fear, you're someone who desperately wants to belong somewhere. Someone who wants to use their gifts to help instead of hurt. The fact that you're still fighting to be better, even after everything you've been through, tells me you haven't given up on yourself completely. Tears began to flow down 13's crystalline cheeks. Jake had never seen a Zephyrian cry before. The tears looked like liquid silver, catching the light. As they fell, I'm so tired, 13 whispered. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of everyone being afraid of me. I'm tired of being afraid of myself. You don't have to carry this alone anymore, Jake said. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Looked at him with those bright silver eyes. Why? Why do you care about someone like me? Because someone like you cared about me once, Jake replied. When I was younger, I made some very bad choices. I hurt people I loved. I thought I was beyond saving. But an old sergeant took a chance on me. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He didn't fix me, but he showed me that I could fix myself if I was willing to try. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll work on it together. One day at a time, one choice at a time. You don't have to become perfect overnight, 13. You just have to decide that you want to be better than you were yesterday. For the first time since arriving at the academy, 13 smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it was real. My name isn't really 13, you know. That's just what they called me at the facilities. My real name is Kai. It's nice to meet you, Kai, Jake said, extending his hand. Kai stared at the offered hand for several seconds. Physical contact had always been dangerous for him. His emotions could transfer through touch, potentially hurting anyone who got too close. But something about Jake's calm presence made him feel safer than he had in years. Slowly, carefully, Kai reached out and shook Jake's hand. Nothing bad happened. No psychic discharge, no loss of control, no pain. Just two people making a connection. This is the first time I've touched another person in 5 years, Kai admitted. How does it feel? Jake asked. Normal. Human. Like maybe I'm not as different as I thought. From that day forward, their morning meetings took on a different character. Instead of Jake talking while Kai listened, they began to have real conversations. Kai asked questions about human culture, about Jake's experiences, about what it meant to be a protector instead of a destroyer. Jake introduced Kai to human concepts like empathy, forgiveness, and second chances. He showed him how warriors in human history had channeled their strength into defending others rather than conquering them. He taught him meditation techniques and breathing exercises that helped control emotional responses. Most importantly, Jake helped Kai understand that his past didn't have to define his future. The scared, angry child who had been passed from facility to facility could grow into someone new. Someone who used his incredible abilities to build instead of break, to protect instead of threaten. The change wasn't instant or complete. Kai still had bad days when the old anger would surface. But now he had someone to talk to about it, someone who believed in his ability to choose a better path. Other instructors began to notice the difference. Kai's destructive episodes stopped completely. He began participating in class discussions. He even helped a struggling cadet with a difficult math problem, using his telekinetic abilities to create visual demonstrations. Commander Vex watched these changes with amazement and growing hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a way to reach their most challenging student after all. 6 months after Jake's arrival at the academy, the changes in Kai were remarkable. The cadet who had once been known only as the dangerous number 13 was now helping other students with their studies. His crystalline skin had settled into a steady, blue color, showing his calm emotional state. The silver glow in his eyes had softened to match his peaceful mind. But the biggest change was in how other cadets treated him. Where once they had run away in fear, now they came to him for help. Kai's incredible abilities, when used with care and purpose, made him an excellent teacher. He could create three-dimensional models with his telekinesis to explain complex battle strategies. His telepathic abilities, used gently and with permission, helped struggling students understand difficult concepts. Jake watched these developments with pride and satisfaction. During their morning meetings in the garden, their conversations had evolved from therapy sessions to discussions between equals. Kai had become fascinated with human military history and philosophy. He asked detailed questions about famous battles, about leadership styles, about the difference between commanding through fear and leading through respect. "Tell me more about this, Alexander the Great," Kai said one morning as they sat on their usual bench. "How did he convince so many different peoples to follow him?" Jake smiled. "That's a complicated question. Alexander was brilliant but also ruthless. He conquered through military genius, but he also learned to understand and respect the cultures he encountered. He didn't just defeat his enemies, he made them into allies." "Like what you did with me?" Kai asked. "Not exactly. You were never my enemy, Kai. You were just someone who needed to remember who you really were underneath all that pain." Kai's features shifted thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that. About who I want to be now that I'm not afraid all the time." "And what have you decided?" "I want to be like my grandfather, someone who builds instead of destroys. But I also want to be like you, someone who helps others find their way when they're lost." This conversation was interrupted by Commander Vex approaching their bench. The Altarian leader looked serious but not angry. "Captain Morrison, Cadet Kai," he said with a formal nod. "I have some news that will interest you both." Jake and Kai stood up out of respect. "What is it, sir?" Jake asked. "The Galactic Council has been watching our progress here with great interest. Word has spread about the remarkable transformation of our formerly most difficult cadet. They want to know how we achieved such success." Kai looked uncomfortable. "Am I in trouble again?" "Quite the opposite," Commander Vex replied with a rare smile. "The Council wants to implement similar programs at other military academies throughout the galaxy. They're looking for instructors who can work with challenging students using unconventional methods." Jake felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. "Are you saying they want me to transfer to another academy?" "Not exactly. They want you to train other instructors in your techniques. You would travel to different worlds, teaching other educators how to reach difficult students. It's a tremendous honor and responsibility." "What about Kai?" Jake asked immediately. Commander Vex looked at the young Zephyrian. "That's partly why I'm here. Kai has been selected for early graduation. His academic scores are perfect, and his practical abilities are extraordinary. More importantly, his emotional stability and leadership qualities have impressed everyone on the faculty." Kai stared in shock. "Early graduation? But I haven't been here a full year yet." "Exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures," Commander Vex explained. We have never had a cadet show such dramatic improvement in such a short time. You've not only overcome your own challenges, but helped other students overcome theirs as well. What would happen after graduation? Kai asked nervously. You would have several options. You could accept a commission in the Galactic Defense Force, continue your education at the Advanced Tactical School, or... Commander Vex paused dramatically. You could join Captain Morrison's new training program. Jake and Kai looked at each other in surprise. Join me how? Jake asked. The Council believes that your success with Kai proves that humans have something valuable to contribute to galactic military education. They want to create teams of human instructors working with graduated students who have overcome similar challenges. Kai would be your first partner. The idea was intriguing but also frightening. Jake had grown attached to his quiet life at the academy, and Kai had just begun to feel safe and accepted here. Leaving would mean starting over in new places with new people. Can we think about it? Jake asked. Of course, but I should mention that your first assignment would be particularly challenging. There's a military academy on Nexus Prime that has 3 students similar to how Kai used to be. They've had several instructors resign, and the local authorities are considering shutting down the program entirely. Kai's crystalline features brightened with interest. Students like I was, powerful but out of control. Exactly. One is a young Rigelian with energy projection abilities. Another is a Centaurian with matter manipulation powers. The third is from a species we've never worked with before. They call themselves the Void Touched, and apparently their cadet can phase in and out of normal space-time. They sound dangerous, Jake said thoughtfully. They sound scared and alone, Kai corrected, just like I was. Jake looked at his friend with admiration. 6 months ago, Kai wouldn't have shown empathy for anyone. Now he was ready to help other struggling students find their way. If we did this, Jake said slowly, what would our authority be? How much freedom would we have to use unconventional methods? Complete freedom, Commander Vex replied. The Council has given you carte blanche to develop your own approach. The only requirement is results. Kai stood up and walked a few steps away, his crystalline skin shifting through several colors as he thought. Finally, he turned back to face them. Jake, do you remember what you told me about the sergeant who helped you when you were lost? Of course. You said he saw something in you that you couldn't see in yourself. He didn't fix you, but he showed you that you could fix yourself. Kai's voice grew stronger and more confident. I think we should do this. I think we should help other people the way you helped me. Jake felt a surge of pride and affection for his friend. Are you sure? It won't be easy. Some of these students might be even more challenging than you were. Kai smiled, and this time it was a confident, determined smile. I'm sure. Besides, I have an advantage that other instructors don't have. What's that? I know exactly what it feels like to be them. I know the fear, the anger, the loneliness. I know what it's like to think you're a monster that nobody could ever understand or accept. Kai's silver eyes gleamed with purpose. But I also know what it feels like to have someone believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. Commander Vex watched this exchange with satisfaction. So you'll accept the assignment? Jake looked at Kai, who nodded enthusiastically. Yes, sir. We'll accept. Excellent. You leave for Nexus Prime in 2 weeks. That should give you time to prepare and say your goodbyes here. As Commander Vex walked away, Jake and Kai sat back down on their bench. The garden was quiet except for the gentle sound of water flowing over stones. You know, Jake said after a few minutes, when I first came here I thought I was going to teach you something about control and discipline. Didn't you? Kai asked. Maybe a little, but you taught me something much more important. You taught me that the most broken people can become the strongest healers, if someone is willing to sit with them in their pain long enough to show them they're not alone. Kai's crystalline features glowed softly with warmth and gratitude. Thank you, Jake, for everything. Thank you too, Kai. I have a feeling our real work is just beginning. They sat together in comfortable silence, teacher and student, human and alien, 2 friends preparing to help others find their way out of darkness and into light.